This lecture is about the phylum Arthropoda. The word arthropod means jointed foot. So arth, think like arthritis is inflammation of the joints. Pod or poda is foot, so jointed foot. All arthropods will have a segmented body, which can be broken down into the head, thorax, and abdomen region. If the head and the thorax are combined, we call that the cephalothorax region. As we've talked about before, the word head means cepha. So when we think cephalopod, right, that was the head, foot. This is the cephalothorax, the head and thorax region. And then they also will have often jointed appendages. Well, they all have jointed appendages. These will be in legs, but they can have antenna or various kind of pincher mouthpieces that you'll see as we go through the various types of arthropods. All arthropods will have an exoskeleton. This means that they do have a skeleton just like we do, except that instead of being on the inside of their body, which is considered an endoskeleton, theirs is an exoskeleton, so it is on the outside of their body. And then within their internal system is that they have inside their body an open circulatory system. This means that their blood is just around their organs. It's pooled everywhere. There's no closed vessels that the blood flows through. And it's not actually blood like we have. It's a different type of fluid that is like their blood. And then most of them have compound eyes. So we're starting to see more complexity within the systems of these organisms. Arthropods reproduce sexually. Their fertilization is usually going to be internal, although there is occasions for external. And then all of them have to molt. And the reason is their exoskeleton it does not grow with them. So their exoskeleton, it hardens at whatever size they are when they make the new one. And then as they grow, their exoskeleton starts to become tight and constricted. Think about like wearing clothes that you had when you were like 5 years old. The clothes didn't grow with you, right? So you had to get new clothes. And just like that, they have to get a new exoskeleton, and so they molt. Well, during that molting period, they're really vulnerable because they are still kind of soft and more at risk of predation in those instances. So they molt, they try to typically find a place where they can do it and kind of be inconspicuous and not draw attention to themselves when they molt. There are 4 groups of arthropods. We're going to specifically focus on 3, but the first one is the Chelicerata, and these include the scorpions and spiders. The second is crustaceans. These are crabs and lobsters, things like that. The third is the hexapods, or the insects. This is 6-legged creatures. And then Myriapoda, these are millipedes and centipedes. That means many legs. So Myria, they have like a ton of different legs. If you ever want to know how to tell the difference between a millipede and a centipede, the centipede has one single leg appendage on each segment of their body, where the millipede, if you look, has 2 sets on each of their segments. If you turn in your notebooklet to the Chelicerate page, we're going to look specifically at this subphylum. So Chelicerata are organisms, animals, arthropods that have chelicera, which are a pair of appendages, they're still jointed, that they use to attack their prey. So if you look here at this picture, that is the chelicera, and they're going to move and flex that and utilize that to attack their prey. They're also going to have 4 pairs of walking legs, which makes them chelicera, which is one of the characteristics of them. So this is spiders, as you can see here, and even ticks and mites. So ticks and mites also belong to the chelicera category. So when we say that spiders are insects, that is a false statement, because our classic insects have 6 legs. As I mentioned earlier, spiders are going to be in the Chelicerate group. These also include scorpions, mites, and ticks. All of these, if you look, have 8 legs to some degree. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 8, 8, 8. And then they also have that chelicera. Their legs are underneath them. That's a horseshoe crab, so you can't see it in the picture, but they do have 8 appendages. Turn now to the crustacean page. Crustaceans are typically aquatic. and mostly marine in their environment. And they will breathe by using gills. So this is one of the times where we start to see more complex respiratory systems in organisms in the way they obtain oxygen. They're going to use gills in order to pull oxygen into their body. There are some terrestrial crustaceans, and these are called isopods. So believe it or not, the roly-poly is really called a pill bug, and it's technically called an isopod. And then sand fleas, which is pictured here, those are also crustaceans that are terrestrial. Aquatic crustaceans can be broken into two groups: the sessile crustaceans, which are like barnacles over here, where they're gonna not move really once they settle and attach. These can be really problematic for fishermen and people with boats, and they can be really invasive if they get anywhere. In fact, I live near Walnut Creek, and that lake, it's a small little lake, but because of the problem of different barnacles and organisms that are being found on the bottoms of boats, there is a rule that you have to inspect your boat before you drop it in the water, because they don't want to possibly risk introducing some species to that lake that will grow and be invasive. And then most other aquatic crustaceans are going to be decapods. Deca means 10. So this is shrimp, crayfish, crab, lobster. They all have 10 appendages instead of the 8 or 6 that we've seen. The last subphyla that we're going to focus on here is the hexapods. These are the insects. Hexa means 6, poda, legs. So they have 6 legs. This is a separate page in your notebooklet. They have a lot of different adaptations for feeding. If you look, every single one of these pictures is going to be of a different organism. Over here, this is a piercing mouthpiece. This is kind of a crushing mouthpiece. This is a sponging mouthpiece. And then this is a siphoning mouthpiece. So they have a lot of different variations for feeding and a lot of variations for flight. Notice the wings are set differently on that organism, and they are going to be the first organisms to have wings. They're the first animal to have wings and successfully be able to migrate from land to air for a method of travel. I will be asking you questions about the insect life cycle on your quizzes and tests, and so it's important to understand that all insects are going to go through some kind of metamorphosis, which is a change. Now it can be complete or it can be incomplete. Complete metamorphosis is like what we see here with the butterfly and the ladybug. Believe it or not, this is a ladybug. It's just the ladybug in its larval state. A lot of times you will see organisms that you will consider worms. You're like, oh, look at this little worm or grub or maggot or whatever. Those are all the larval stages of something else. Just like a caterpillar is the butterfly, still same organism. This is the larval stage of a ladybug. So I found a bunch of those on my plant in my front yard, and I wasn't 100% sure what it was, so I looked it up, and it was the larva of the ladybug. And so we often think of these as totally separate organisms, but they are in fact the same species. It's just that it goes through a significant physical change in its life. Now, not all of them do. Praying mantis, for example, it comes out looking like that. I found a bunch of tiny little baby praying mantises, manti, whatever you want to say, in my garage. And they were so small, like as small as my pinky fingernail. So they are just going to grow and have a slight metamorphosis, not significant physical change. But all insects will go through some kind of metamorphosis. And then our last slide here are groups of insects. There's a lot of different kinds. It's a really big group of organisms. In fact, the arthropods are the largest phylum of animals in existence. There's so many different types, and the insects is the largest group within that. So there's a bunch of different organisms, animals, arthropods, that belong to the Hexapoda subphylum. And that's Coleoptera, which are the beetles. We have Diptera, those are the flies and mosquitoes. The Lepidoptera, those are the butterflies and the moths. And then the Hymenoptera, which are the ants, bees, and wasps. And we can talk about the various things within those, but I just want you to be able to recognize when you see an insect versus a spider versus a crustacean and be able to identify key features that divide those organisms.